I, 32, female, never thought I'd be writing one of these posts, but here I am, completely baffled by the situation I'm in with my mother-in-law. My husband, Trevor, 34, male, and I have been married for 5 years now, together for 8. We've always had what I considered a healthy, equal partnership. We make decisions together, support each other's careers, and generally function as a team. That is, until my mother-in-law Barbara decided to insert herself into our marriage in the most backyard way possible. Some background. Barbara has always been what you might call traditional. She was a stay-at-home mom to Trevor and his 2 siblings, while her husband, now deceased, was the breadwinner. She takes pride in having been the perfect wife who cooked, cleaned, and never questioned her husband's decisions. I've always been polite and respectful towards her, despite our obviously different worldviews. Trevor has always been supportive of me, never expected me to be like his mother. He enjoys that we're equals and often tells me how much he values my independence and strength. Last month, we were at Barbara's house for Sunday dinner, which has become something of a monthly tradition since Trevor's father passed away 2 years ago. Everything was fine until Trevor mentioned that we were planning a vacation to Europe next summer, and that I had been the one to plan most of it since I'm better at organizing trips than he is. Barbara got this weird look on her face but didn't say anything at the time. After dinner, Trevor went to help his brother with something in the garage, leaving me alone with Barbara in the kitchen. I was helping her clean up when she suddenly turned to me and said that she needed to have a woman-to-woman talk with me. What followed was basically a lecture about how I wasn't being a real wife to her son because I didn't obey him properly. She said that in her day, wives would never dream of making big decisions like vacation planning without their husband's explicit approval and guidance. She literally told me that a wife's role is to submit to her husband's leadership, and that my modern ideas were undermining the natural order of marriage. I was so shocked that I couldn't even respond properly. I just mumbled something about Trevor and me having a different kind of relationship and tried to change the subject. But Barbara kept going, saying that she was worried about our marriage because Trevor needed to be respected as the head of the household, and that by making decisions and having my own opinions, I was emasculating him. She even suggested that if I didn't change my ways, Trevor might eventually leave me for someone more submissive. When Trevor and I got home that night, I told him everything his mother had said. He was furious with her and immediately called to confront her. Barbara tried to backpedal, saying she was just concerned about our happiness and that she came from a different generation. Trevor told her he loves our marriage exactly as it is, and that she needed to respect our choices. The call ended with Barbara in tears, saying we had misunderstood her intentions. I thought that would be the end of it, but at the next family gathering 2 weeks later, Barbara brought it up again. This time in front of Trevor's sister and brother-in-law. She made a pointed comment about how some wives these days don't know how to properly respect their husbands, while looking directly at me. When Trevor defended me, she said she was just expressing concern because she'd noticed how I override Trevor's decisions and don't let him be a man. That's when I had an idea. If Barbara wanted me to obey Trevor so badly, then that's exactly what I would do, completely and utterly to the letter. Trevor was on board immediately when I explained my plan. He thought it was hilarious and a perfect way to show his mother how ridiculous her expectations were. So, the next time we were at Barbara's house, I put on the performance of a lifetime. I wouldn't sit until Trevor told me I could. I asked his permission before taking food or speaking. I deferred to him on every tiny decision, from what time we should leave to whether I should have another glass of water. Barbara seemed pleased at first, shooting me approving looks and even commenting to her daughter that I was finally learning. Then Trevor started having fun with it. He casually mentioned that he'd been thinking a lot about what his mother said about him being the head of the household and making decisions for our family. He said he decided that for our mental health and the health of our marriage, we would be taking a 6-month break from Sunday dinners at Barbara's house. Barbara's face went white. She asked, why would we do that? Clearly not expecting this outcome. Trevor, playing his part perfectly, said that as the man of the house, he determined that Barbara's constant criticism and attempts to interfere in our marriage were creating a toxic environment, and since I was now being a proper wife and obeying his decisions, we would be limiting contact with her until she could respect our marriage as it was. Barbara immediately turned to me, expecting me to object or try to change Trevor's mind. Instead, I looked at Trevor with exaggerated adoration and said, whatever you think is best, dear. You're the head of our household, and I trust your judgment completely. The look on Barbara's face was priceless. She realized that her own logic was being used against her, and there was nothing she could say without contradicting herself. If she argued that I should try to change Trevor's mind, she'd be admitting that wives should have input in decisions. If she accepted Trevor's decision, she'd be cut off from us for 6 months. She tried to backpedal, saying that, of course, marriages should have mutual respect, and that she didn't mean wives should have no say at all. But Trevor just smiled and said, no, Mom, you were right. I need to be the decision maker in my household, and I've decided we need space from you. We left shortly after, with Barbara in tears and Trevor's siblings trying not to laugh as they witnessed the whole thing and knew exactly what we were doing. On the drive home, Trevor and I couldn't stop laughing at how perfectly our plan had worked. But that's when things started to escalate. Barbara began calling Trevor constantly, crying about how she was being punished for trying to help. She even showed up at our house unannounced one evening, demanding to speak with Trevor alone. He refused, saying that as the head of the household, he decided that any conversations with his mother would include me. When Barbara saw that her usual tactics weren't working, she started recruiting family members to her cause. Trevor's aunt called to tell him he was being cruel to his mother. His cousin sent messages saying we were overreacting. But the most surprising ally came in the form of Trevor's sister, who told everyone to back off because Barbara had been trying to control Trevor's relationships for years. And it was about time someone stood up to her. The situation came to a head last weekend when we attended a family birthday party for Trevor's niece. We'd agreed to go for the sake of his sister and the kids, with the understanding that we would leave if Barbara started causing problems. And sure enough, within an hour of arriving, Barbara cornered me in the kitchen and hissed that I was turning her son against her and that I'd pay for it eventually. I calmly walked out of the kitchen, found Trevor, and told him what had happened. True to our agreement, Trevor announced that we were leaving and why. When Barbara tried to deny, threatening me, Trevor's sister spoke up and said she'd overheard the whole thing. The resulting argument led to Barbara being asked to leave the party instead of us, which was apparently the first time anyone in the family had ever stood up to her publicly. That night, Trevor made a decision that honestly surprised even me. He told me he was cutting his mother off completely until she could apologize sincerely and show real change. Not just for 6 months, but indefinitely. He said that watching how she treated me, not just recently, but subtle digs over the years that I brushed off, had made him realize how toxic her influence was. The next day, Trevor sent his mother a detailed email explaining that her behavior was unacceptable and that we would not be in contact with her until she could respect our marriage and me as his equal partner. He ended it by saying that this wasn't my decision, that he was obeying his own boundary as her son. It's been 3 days since Trevor sent that email, and Barbara has absolutely lost it. She's called us dozens of times, left tearful voicemails, and even posted vague statuses on Facebook about ungrateful children and manipulative daughters-in-law. Trevor's brother called to say that Barbara showed up at his house in hysterics, claiming that I've brainwashed Trevor and stolen her son. I'm standing firm with Trevor on this boundary, but I can't help wondering if we've gone too far. The original plan was just to teach her a lesson about her outdated views on marriage, not to cause a complete family meltdown. Trevor says he has no regrets and that this was a long time coming, but I feel guilty for being the catalyst. So, did we take this too far? Should we have just ignored her comments about me not being a real wife, instead of turning her logic against her? Is there a way to resolve this that doesn't involve either total estrangement or me having to tolerate her disrespect? I'm truly at a loss here. Update 1. First of all, thank you to everyone who commented on my original post. Your support and advice really helped me feel less crazy about this whole situation. A lot has happened in the last few days, so I wanted to give you all an update. The day after I posted, Trevor's sister Emma called us to check in. She ended up coming over for dinner and revealed some family history I hadn't known before. Apparently, Barbara had pulled similar stunts with Emma's husband early in their marriage, constantly criticizing how Emma wasn't traditional enough and suggesting her husband deserved better. Emma admitted that instead of standing up to her mother like Trevor did, she tried to appease her by actually changing some of her behavior, which led to problems in her own marriage. She said she was proud of Trevor for taking a stand and wished she'd done the same years ago. Emma also told us that after Barbara was asked to leave the birthday party, she had gone to their brother Nate's house and spent hours bad-mouthing me. The interesting twist is that Nate's wife, Lisa, who has always been pretty quiet at family gatherings, finally snapped and told Barbara that she'd been making everyone uncomfortable for years with her judgmental attitude. So, it turns out, I wasn't the only daughter-in-law suffering under Barbara's helpful advice. I was just the first one who didn't silently take it. Yesterday, we received a letter from Barbara. Not an email, an actual handwritten letter delivered by mail. I was hopeful at first that it might be an apology, but instead, it was 6 pages of Barbara defending her position. She wrote that she was only trying to guide our marriage because she has more experience and knows what makes a marriage last. She claimed that Trevor's father, who passed away 2 years ago, would be disappointed in Trevor for how he's treating his mother. The most manipulative part was where she said she'd been having chest pains from the stress and implied that if anything happens to her health, it would be our fault. Trevor read the letter once and then tore it up. He said his father would never have talked to him the way his mother does. And using his dad's memory to manipulate him was the last straw. He called his siblings to warn them about the health claims, suspecting Barbara might use that to try to force contact. Emma confirmed that Barbara had made similar claims during past family conflicts and was, in her words, healthier than anyone half her age. The most surprising development came last night. Trevor's brother, Nate, who has generally stayed out of family drama, called to tell us that he and Lisa had decided to also take a break from Barbara until she apologizes to all of her daughters-in-law. He said he'd been uncomfortable with his mother's behavior for years, but had convinced himself it wasn't his place to interfere. Seeing Trevor take a stand made him realize he'd been enabling Barbara's behavior by staying neutral. So now Barbara has effectively lost contact with all three of her children and their families. According to Emma, she's been calling their extended family members, telling a completely different version of events, claiming that I've somehow turned all of her children against her out of spite because she offered marital advice. Fortunately, most of the family knows what Barbara is really like and isn't buying her story. Trevor is doing amazingly well through all of this. He said he feels like a weight has been lifted now that he's finally standing up to his mother after years of making excuses for her behavior. He thanked me for not putting up with it and said he wishes he'd set boundaries with her years ago. As for me, I'm feeling a mix of vindication and guilt. I'm glad we stood up for ourselves and that Trevor's siblings are supporting us, but I never intended to cause such a major family rift. Trevor assures me that this was inevitable and would have happened eventually, even without our obedience plan, but I still feel responsible. We're planning to talk to a family therapist to get some objective advice on how to handle this situation going forward. I'll update again if anything significant changes. Thank you all again for your support. Update 2. Things have escalated in ways I never could have predicted. 2 days ago, we came home from work to find Barbara sitting on our front porch. She'd been waiting there for over 2 hours. Trevor asked her to leave, but she refused, saying she wouldn't go until we heard her out. When Trevor said we could talk another time, if she scheduled it properly, she burst into tears and said we were treating her like a stranger instead of family. Against my better judgment, we let her inside. Barbara immediately launched into a speech about how worried she's been and how hurtful our silent treatment has been to her. Trevor tried to explain that this wasn't silent treatment, but a boundary we'd set after she disrespected me. But she talked over him. When she finally paused for breath, Trevor very calmly said, "Mom, we told you in the email that we need an apology before we can move forward." Barbara looked at him like he'd grown a second head and said, "Apologize for what? For caring about your marriage? For trying to help your wife be better for you?" I could see Trevor's patience evaporating. But before he could respond, Barbara turned to me and said something I still can't believe. She said, "This is between me and my son. You've done enough damage turning him against me. If you really cared about this family, you'd leave the room and let us sort this out." Trevor absolutely lost it. Not yelling, but in this terrifyingly calm voice, he told his mother that I was his family now, his priority and his partner. He said that every word she spoke was proving exactly why we needed this boundary with her. Then he told her she had 2 choices, leave voluntarily, or he would call the police and have her removed for trespassing. Barbara switched tactics immediately, sobbing and saying she didn't recognize her son anymore, that I had changed him, and she asked how he could threaten his own mother with the police. Trevor just walked to the phone and started dialing. Barbara grabbed her purse and left, but not before telling me that I would regret destroying her family. After she left, Trevor was shaking with anger. He called his siblings to warn them about what happened, and Emma suggested we might need to consider a restraining order if Barbara's behavior continued to escalate. The thought hadn't even crossed my mind until then. But looking back at the pattern of escalation, it suddenly seemed like a real possibility we might need to consider. The real bombshell came yesterday. Trevor's aunt, his father's sister, called to check on us because Barbara had been telling family members that I physically pushed her during our confrontation and that Trevor chose me over his mother even after seeing me assault her. This is completely fabricated. I never even got close to Barbara during her visit. Trevor was furious and immediately called his cousins and other family members to correct the story before it spread further. Last night, things took an even more serious turn. We were having dinner with Emma and her husband when Trevor got an email notification. Barbara had somehow found my work email. I'm a manager at a local company, and sent an email to my boss claiming that I was using company resources for personal vendettas and suggesting they should review my work conduct. The email was vague about specifics but clearly meant to cause problems for me professionally. Thankfully, my boss and I have a good relationship, and when I explained the situation this morning, she was understanding and concerned rather than suspicious. She's documented the email in case Barbara tries to escalate further, and the company's IT department has blocked Barbara's email address. Trevor is beside himself with a mixture of anger and disbelief. He says he knew his mother could be difficult and manipulative, but he never imagined she would try to jeopardize my career. He's contacted a lawyer to discuss our options, including the possibility of a cease and desist letter or, if necessary, a restraining order. The whole situation has gone from an attempt to teach Barbara a lesson about her outdated views on marriage to something that feels dangerous and unpredictable. I'm trying to stay calm, but I'm genuinely concerned about what she might try next. Trevor has been my rock through all of this, constantly reassuring me that none of this is my fault and that we'll get through it together. We have an appointment with the family therapist tomorrow, which can't come soon enough. I'm hoping they can give us some strategies for de-escalating this situation before it gets even worse. I'll update again soon, hopefully with better news. Thank you all for your continued support and advice. Update 3. I'm still in shock as I write this, but I wanted to provide a final update because the situation with Barbara has taken an unexpected turn that none of us saw coming. After our last update, Trevor and I met with the family therapist who advised us to document everything and suggested we consult with a lawyer about a restraining order given Barbara's escalating behavior. We took her advice and scheduled a consultation for the following week. 2 days ago, Trevor's brother, Nate, called us in the middle of the night. Barbara had shown up at his house at 11 p.m., extremely agitated and demanding that he and his wife choose sides between her and us. When they refused to engage and asked her to leave, she had what they described as a complete meltdown in their living room, knocking over a lamp and screaming that her children had abandoned her. Nate's teenage daughter was so frightened by her grandmother's behavior that she locked herself in her bedroom and called her aunt Emma. Nate finally had to threaten to call the police before Barbara would leave. The next morning, we all agreed that the situation had become dangerous and unpredictable. Trevor, Nate, and Emma decided to contact Barbara's doctor to express concerns about her mental health, as her behavior had become increasingly erratic and seemed out of character even for her. The doctor couldn't share information with them due to privacy laws, but agreed to reach out to Barbara. Yesterday afternoon, everything changed. Barbara's neighbor called Emma because an ambulance had taken Barbara to the hospital. Apparently, the doctor had convinced Barbara to come in for an evaluation based on the family's concerns, and during routine tests, they discovered a significant issue that required immediate attention. We all rushed to the hospital, setting aside the conflict given the circumstances. The doctor informed us that Barbara has a brain tumor. They believe it's been growing slowly for some time and is located in a part of the brain that can affect behavior, impulse control, and emotional regulation. While they won't know if it's benign or malignant until after surgery, the doctor explained that the tumor's location could absolutely explain the personality changes and erratic behavior we've been experiencing, especially if it's been growing for months or even years. I can't describe the mix of emotions we're all feeling. There's shock and worry about Barbara's health, of course, but there's also this strange sense of relief at having an explanation for her recent behavior that goes beyond just Barbara being Barbara. Trevor, in particular, is struggling with guilt for having been so angry with his mother when it now appears her actions may have been influenced by a medical condition. His sister Emma reminded him that while the tumor might explain her recent escalation, it doesn't erase years of Barbara's controlling behavior before this. Barbara is scheduled for surgery tomorrow to remove the tumor and determine whether further treatment will be necessary. The doctors are cautiously optimistic about her prognosis, though they've warned us that recovery can be a long process, and there might be personality changes or cognitive effects even after the tumor is removed. For now, we've all agreed to put the conflict on hold and focus on Barbara's health. Trevor, Nate, and Emma are working together to coordinate her care and support each other through this unexpected development. I'm doing my best to support Trevor as he processes all of this. This whole experience has been a roller coaster of emotions from start to finish. What began as an attempt to stand up to my mother-in-law's outdated views on marriage turned into a family crisis, which has now transformed into a medical emergency. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that family dynamics are rarely simple, and sometimes what looks like malice might have deeper causes we couldn't have imagined. I don't know what our relationship with Barbara will look like after her recovery. The doctor mentioned that if the tumor has been affecting her personality, we might see significant changes following its removal. There's a possibility that when Barbara emerges from recovery, she could be quite different from the woman who told me I wasn't a real wife for not obeying my husband. For now, we're taking things one day at a time. Trevor and I are committed to supporting Barbara's recovery while still maintaining healthy boundaries. We've agreed that regardless of the medical explanation, we won't return to accepting disrespectful behavior. But we're open to rebuilding the relationship if Barbara is able and willing to relate to us differently after her treatment. Thank you everyone who has followed our story and offered support and advice along the way. While this isn't the resolution any of us expected, it's a powerful reminder that compassion and understanding should always be our first instinct, even in the most difficult family situations. I'll post another update after Barbara's surgery if there are significant developments to share. Update 4. I wasn't planning to write another update, but so many people have been asking for news about Barbara's surgery and recovery that I wanted to provide some closure to this story. Barbara's surgery went well and the doctors were able to remove the entire tumor. Thankfully, it turned out to be benign, though it had grown to a significant size. The medical team believes it had been slowly growing for years, gradually affecting her behavior in ways that might have been subtle at first, but become more pronounced recently. The neurologist explained that the tumor was located in an area that affects impulse, control, emotional regulation, and social behavior. He said that while it wouldn't have created personality traits that weren't there before, it likely amplified existing tendencies and removed the filters that might have previously kept those tendencies in check. In other words, Barbara might have always had traditional views about marriage, but the tumor could have affected her ability to express those views appropriately or to recognize social cues indicating she was crossing boundaries. Barbara has been in recovery for the past week, and the change in her demeanor is noticeable. She's quieter and more reflective and seems confused by reports of her recent behavior. When Trevor gently explained some of what had happened, she became tearful and said it felt like hearing about someone else's actions. Yesterday I visited her alone at her request. I was nervous, but Trevor encouraged me to go, thinking it might be healing for both of us. Barbara was sitting up in her hospital bed looking frail but clear-eyed. She took my hand and apologized for everything, not just the recent escalation, but for years of subtle criticism and attempts to control Trevor. She said that while she doesn't remember all of her recent actions clearly, she's been doing a lot of thinking and can see how her traditional views were actually about control rather than genuine concern for our marriage. What surprised me most was when she admitted that her own marriage hadn't been the perfect traditional relationship she'd always portrayed. She confessed that she'd created a fiction about her marriage to Trevor's father that she told so often she almost believed it herself. In reality, their relationship had been strained, with his father working long hours to avoid coming home and Barbara trying to control every aspect of family life to compensate for her lack of control in other areas. It was an incredibly vulnerable conversation, and while one apology doesn't erase years of behavior, it felt sincere. We both cried, and I told her that I was open to building a new relationship based on mutual respect as she recovers. The road ahead won't be easy. Barbara will need physical therapy and possibly cognitive therapy as part of her recovery. Trevor, Nate, and Emma are working together to arrange care for her when she's released from the hospital. They've agreed to split responsibilities and have family meetings to ensure no one person bears too much of the burden. As for our marriage, Trevor and I are stronger than ever. This experience, as difficult as it's been, has shown us both how important it is to present a united front and support each other through family challenges. Trevor has been incredible throughout this entire ordeal, standing up for our relationship while also showing compassion for his mother once we understood the medical factors at play. One unexpected positive outcome is that all three siblings and their spouses have grown closer through this crisis. Emma has suggested monthly dinners with just the 6 adults to maintain this newfound solidarity and support each other in maintaining healthy boundaries with Barbara as she recovers. While I would never have chosen this path, and the fear and stress we experienced were very real, I'm cautiously optimistic about the future. Barbara's health crisis has created an opportunity for healing that might never have happened otherwise. It's a powerful reminder that compassion and understanding don't mean accepting mistreatment, but they do allow for the possibility of genuine change and reconciliation when the circumstances are right. Thank you all for your support throughout this journey. Your advice and encouragement helped me stay strong during the darkest moments, and I'm grateful to have had this community to turn to when I needed it the most. Stay tuned for more stories from Our Girl Relationships.